This is the MSI GL62M 7REX. It is a budget notebook. Now, I picked this one up here from China for $899 US. Considering the spec, I feel it's a really good price. So it has a Core i7 Kaby Lake 7700HQ. Now, that's a quad-core CPU. The GPU on board here is an Nvidia 1050 Ti with 4GB of double data rate 5 RAM. Now, the stock base configuration that you get straight out of the box is 8GB of RAM, so only one SODIMM is used. There's another spare one in there. In this review here, I've upgraded my unit, as I'll show you in just a second. And we have a 1TB hard drive. So gaining access to the internals isn't that difficult, but you do have a lot of screws here that you need to remove all around the outside and then just pry off the lid. And that gives you access to everything. So for my review, I've added an additional 8GB of RAM, you can see slotted in here, and my own SSD. So this slot here will support NVMe or PCIe ×4. I'm running a 960 Evo in here, and the 1TB drive would be located right here, the spindle drive, which is 7,200 RPM, but I have removed that because I wasn't happy with the noise it was making. So upgradability is quite good. We can replace the RAM, replace the hard drive, add an SSD, SATA 3 or NVMe, and we can replace the wireless card here if you're not happy with the one they've included. So the cooling solution that they have on here, 6 copper transfer heat pipes and a very large, you can see, thick copper base here that's connecting to straight onto the GPU die here. The CPU is right here. Looks like it's going to be really good and efficient. But as I found out later in my testing process, that really these two fans here, or at least the CPU fan, is just a little too small, and it's not just blowing out a sufficient amount of air, at least when you leave it on the default cooling mode without using that Cooler Booster 4, will run into thermal throttling, but more on that later on in the video. So you'll see that the battery cell here, 41 watt hours, isn't particularly large for a laptop that's 15.6 inches, but battery life hasn't really ever been a priority when it comes to gaming laptops, and nothing has changed here. Now, if there is one thing that is missing on here, it is a subwoofer. It would be great if it had a 2.1 system, because these 4 speakers that we do have downwards firing, as you'll hear from my sample later on, they sound particularly flat, and they could really be aided by the fact of having a sub located about here. The GL62M weighs 2.3 kilos, and the weight distribution isn't too bad. Slightly heavier at the rear here, but overall it doesn't in hand feel as if it's 2.3, but perhaps a little bit lighter. Now, the build is completely plastic, but it is a quality plastic they have used, and it has like a matte kind of coating to it, so it's quite grippy. It's not slippery, but it does have on the lid, you can see here, quite a bit of flex. I don't believe this is going to be an issue, however, but the materials used here on this budget laptop aren't the same kind of quality you get on the more premium options. So on the left of the laptop, we have microphone in, headphone out, Type-C port. Now, unfortunately, it's not Thunderbolt, and it's only USB 3 spec. A USB 3 port, mini display out, HDMI out, another USB 3 port, Ethernet, that's 1 gigabit as well, so nice and fast, and then a Kensington lock slot there. Then on the right, DC in for charging, of course, with a 150 watt power supply. We have an SD card slot, which is great to see, and it's one of those click-in style ones, so you shouldn't be breaking these cards off by accident with those ones that sometimes stick out like that, which personally, I really hate those ones. However, this port is only wired up via a USB 2 hub, so it is slow. You cannot take advantage of high-speed cards. And then, lastly, a USB 2 port. On the rear, the 2 exhaust vents for the CPU and GPU, which I feel is a bit of a design error, that these vents should be a little bit bigger, so the fans inside could also be larger. So it has a SteelSeries keyboard. Now, if I press down really hard here, you will see there's a bit of flex in the design there, but under normal typing pressure using this, it doesn't bother me at all. And in fact, I find typing on this keyboard is really good. It's a nice keyboard. I do like it. It comes with the US layout, even though this is a Chinese version. That's the layout they use there in China. Now, the touchpad is a Synaptics one, and it's the same exact material as the rest of the palm rest. Now, palm rest, if I press down here, you see a bit of flex, but again, when using this, it's not really a problem. I'm only just pushing quite hard here just to show you the design, how rigid it is. It's not exactly super rigid like the premium models, like the Ghost series that are actually slimmer too. they seem to be a lot more rigid and don't suffer from so much flex there. We've got two individual large clicky style mouse buttons, and overall the touchpad to me feels alright. However, I have had to increase the speed of it, increase the speed and the sensitivity to get really the most out of it. It's certainly not the best touchpad I have used. And also one thing to note, that the material, this plastic, is a complete smudge magnet. Already the touchpad's starting to get a little bit shiny. I can see marks from my fingers and things. So you'll be wiping this down all the time to try and keep it looking clean and new. I've only had it now for about 7 or 8 days. I've been using it the whole time, and already it's lost that kind of new look to it and already looks used, which is a shame. So up the top here we have the power button with the status LED there, and we have this G. Now this is for the gaming center, so Dragon Gaming Center will bring up all your options and stuff there. And this button, which works via the BIOS, is the cooler booster. This then puts both of the fans to maximum RPM to try and push out as much air as possible. One thing to point out too that I don't think a lot of reviews are mentioning is that if you do get this particular model, even though it is cheaper, one other con is that the BIOS is going to be all in Chinese. And as far as I can tell, you can't change it. I've flashed a new BIOS update and it still remained in Chinese. I've pulled the battery that's on the motherboard, I've unplugged the battery, yet again, still defaults and is always in Chinese. So as you can see here, that the IPS panel that's in here, no, it's not a TN, it's only the earlier models that had crappy TN panels in here, is quite decent. You can see the blacks are dark here, and my unit, I think I've lucked out here with the IPS lottery, don't seem to have any screen bleed whatsoever. So the panel does have an anti-glare coating on here, so it's not susceptible to reflections. I've got my powerful studio lights on and they are not reflecting on the upper right hand side there, which they probably would do if this was a glossy panel. So the maximum brightness comes out to 247 lux, which is not bad for an anti-glare panel. And overall, I really do like this screen, but bear in mind though that this is a 60 Hz panel. It does not go up to 120 Hz like other MSI recent laptops that they have released. Now looking in the device manager here, just wanted to point out what we have for the wireless chipset. So it's Intel's dual band wireless AC3168 here. So it's not one of the fastest ones. Intel does have that 8200 series, which do offer better performance. Now I did a quick benchmark here. Now the speeds should be a little bit higher than this, but at the time I was actually, I think I was uploading something else, but I have seen this get up to almost my full fiber optic line speed here, which is 300 megabits per second, both upload and download symmetric. And I've also noticed that the range of the wireless, perfectly fine. I think it's because the whole housing on this laptop is plastic. It's not inhibited the signal, of course, if it was a metal build to it, so perfectly fine there with that. Now, if we have a look at the SSD, I have installed my own one here. So it came with a 1 terabyte 7200 RPM drive that is rather slow, but it's actually, for the type of drive it is, it's not really that bad because it gets around 130 reads and writes megabits per second. But with my drive here, of course, that is running in PCIe ×4, and I've just finished up benchmarking it here. So very good performance out of that. That is blazing fast. I really do love those drives. So no bottlenecks at all when it comes to storage here. Now that slot is a PCI ×4 slot, but also SATA 3. So if you do happen to have a 22x80 SATA 3 SSD, you could put that in there, but of course your speeds will cap out around 550 megabytes per second, reads and writes there, sequentials. If you have seen my unboxing, one thing to note here that is going to be a bit of an issue for some people is that this particular model is the Chinese version. So it did ship with Windows 10 in Chinese. However, what I did is I created a Windows 10 media USB pen drive, flash drive, and then I installed the Windows 10, but make sure you install the Windows 10 home version in English. You can add your own language packs later on. And it did activate using the existing key that's incorporated, part of the BIOS. So activation was not an issue. You do not have to buy a new license for this, which is one positive. Now to have a look at a couple of benchmarks here. So this is the Heaven benchmark number 4, average frames per second of 81, and the score is 2044. I thought that actually wasn't too bad considering it's a 1050 Ti. Quite pleased with that score. Now you will notice that my clocks here, it is overclocked. So for most of these scores here I will be overclocking the GPU here. And the reason why I feel that a lot of people will probably be doing this to squeeze the absolute maximum out of this chipset. I'll show you those overclocks here just with MSI Afterburner. I'll just kill that Heaven benchmark off there in the background. So there we got the clocks that I've applied. So 110 to the core clock and then 1 GB to the RAM. So they looks like they've underclocked the RAM to start with anyway. It could probably go even higher than that. Now I've experienced absolutely no issues with this overclock. So no artifacts, no driver crashing issues, nothing like that. I could even probably push the core clock even higher, but I'm going to leave it at that, I feel, which is fine. And you see here that the driver that I'm using is the 385.41, which at the time of this review is the latest driver here. So Cinebench R15, 84 frames per second for OpenGL, and then the CPU got 724. Now if you do keep the stock configuration, which is only the 8 GB of RAM in single channel, then this score will be something in the upper 600s. So a little bit slower there because I've got dual bandwidth and more RAM. It's just going to help a little bit there to speed things up. So I also ran Geekbench 4 here. Decent score. It's now faster again because I'm running dual channel RAM, as the stock configuration only has that one slot in there, allowing you to put an extra additional 8 GB in. Here is the OpenCL score, which is using the GPU. Again, that is with the overclock. When it's stock, it's around 80,000. So this overclock here is basically giving us a boost of around 10 to 11% on the GPU, which is really good considering that is a free boost there. Not as high as some GPUs, but overall not too bad at all. So the stock score here of Firestrike, and you can see now with the overclock, we get 10%, more or less there. So not bad. Now just to touch on the battery life here, right now I have forced the GPU to be the Nvidia one, the 1050 Ti. And that is just through the control panel here. And you can set that. You can also force it to just the Intel. Now why I've done this is just to demonstrate the kind of battery life you can expect. So you get around 1 hour and 30 minutes if you're not gaming on the dedicated GPU. But if you do something more demanding like gaming, or you're doing some 3D editing or video editing or something like that, then you're only going to get around 1 hour of battery life from the 41 watt hour battery there. Now, if you turn over or leave it on auto select over to the integrated graphics, then you're looking around double the time. Then it consumes a lot less power, around 3 hours, which is not ideal. This is not a laptop designed really. It's a gaming laptop. It's not really designed for battery life. For me, the battery life is really what I expect for a gaming laptop. So nothing amazing at all. In fact, it's very poor as expected, really. So how is gaming performance? Well, it can play all the latest games. 1080p, it's not a problem. You do not have to lower the resolution to something like 720p. But I have noticed that it will thermal throttle. So if you don't use the cooler booster, which is currently on at the moment, you'll be fine with the cooler booster on. I just find that the cooling at the moment isn't really doing an adequate job if you don't use that extra loud fan cooler booster, which increases the RPMs on both of the GPU and CPU fan and really cools things right down. So games like this, yep, perfectly playable.
The enemy has armed objective butter.
So you can see that this is what happens when you don't use the cooler booster mode, that the temperatures will get up there quite hot and it will run into thermal throttling, which was triggered right here. You can see with that peak. This is Intel Extreme Tuning Utility. So it's telling me there that yes, it did thermal throttle. And that was right when the frame rate literally halved. It went from about 50 frames per second down to 2630, which is not good to see. But if you do use the cooler booster, then thermal throttling will not take place and you will not see this. Now editing 4K video here, which was really the main reason why I bought this particular laptop here. With the 16 gigabytes of RAM in here now, the timeline is very fast. I mean, this is pretty much just real time, so no problems with that. No slowdown or lag like trying to do this on a Core M3. So I'll be using, just like I did with the Mi Notebook Air 13, the YouTube 4K preset is what it's going to be, and exactly, well, more or less 1 minute there. Export it now, we'll see how long it takes. However, if you have a look at this, we did run into some thermal throttling again, just like when I was gaming on it. It didn't affect the CPU speeds much though. In fact, it looks like they hardly dropped really, only about 100 or even less than that megahertz. But it did get up to 96 degrees, you can see right there, which is just far too hot, I feel. So really, the cooling solution on this isn't that great. I don't think it's doing a very good job here if it's getting up to 96 degrees. So there are the 4 downwards firing speakers and unfortunately no sub. So these speakers, they sound flat. They do lack bass, but they certainly do not lack in volume. So let's have a listen to them. Now the laptop does come with MSI's Dragon Center like all of their gaming laptops, and what it allows you to do is just get a quick overview here of the RPMs on the fans, your power mode, your GPU core clocks and things like that. Temperatures are also listed in here, and the system tune, you're able just to tweak a few things. So USB boost helps increase the speed there of your USB external drives and flash drives, storage boost as well, and you can control the different modes here with the turbo. Now this turbo here is actually overclocking only the GPU because the CPU that's in here is not overclockable. It's not a K series one, so it's not the HK. And we also have the control of the fans. You can customize the fan speeds to your own liking here in the advanced setting to control that. And then also music, you can control through there the Nahimic music settings, and then the RGB. So you've got different modes there for anti-blue to remove the blue light, movie, office, standard, things like that. Okay, so after a week of using this, where do I stand? I'm kind of a little bit mixed here because I do like the build of it. I love typing on this keyboard. It's actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Budget gaming laptop. You have to remember that this is really at the bottom end. Not quite the bottom, but hey, I paid $899 US for this, which I feel is a really decent price considering I've got the Core i5 Kaby Lake 7700 in here, and then a 1050 Ti with not 2 gigabytes of RAM, but the 4 gigabytes there. So the screen is really good. Overall, the build, the touchpad, I end up using a mouse most of the time. I find it's just sometimes just not quite as responsive as I would like, and the material, really wish it was made out of glass or something, but then again, they've got to tone down on the materials they've used here. So it's all plasticky kind of build. There's no premium materials at all. So there is basically some cons that start out with as soon as you get this, as soon as you turn it on, it's Windows 10 Chinese. You can fix that. The license will pull through, not a problem. The drivers are all on MSI's website. The BIOS is in Chinese, but not too much of an issue really because it's locked down anyway, so you can't tweak advanced settings like power limits or something like that. The biggest con for me, I feel, is a design flaw here, is the fans. The cooling fan on the CPU is just not large enough. It should be a larger size to push out a higher volume of air to keep it from thermal throttling. So we should never see thermal throttling on a gaming laptop. It doesn't matter if this is a $899 that I paid for it or a $2,000 laptop. It should not have thermal throttling if it's designed properly because it's got 6 copper cooling pipes in there. That's awesome. It looks good. It looks the part, doesn't it? But because of that smaller fan, it's just not pushing out the air that it should be, resulting in higher temperatures reaching 96 degrees Celsius encoding 4K video. Now, if they'd improved the cooling on this, I would say straight away, yeah, this is an absolute steal. Go out there and buy it. Now, it could be my unit. I don't believe it is because I've had a look now at the thermal pad or the paste pad that's on there, and things look normal to me. I don't see any problem with it. It's not like they left a layer of plastic under there or something. No, it's all perfect to me. So really, I feel it's those fans, and really MSI needs to get onto this, improve the design, and then this will be a really good gaming budget laptop here that can handle everything with that i7-7700 that's in there. So I do hope to catch you back with more up-and-coming reviews on laptops. Maybe not gaming ones, but more the budget-orientated. But I will be planning, and I hope to review the Xiaomi Mi Notebook Pro soon once that is finally released. So I hope to catch you back then. Thank you so much for watching this rather long review here, and I do hope to see you back in the channel soon.